I just couldn't believe it when he started already sort of complaining to the press that she was being mistreated, because generally speaking, I don't think she was.
It was a really bad beginning.
I thought it was a very bad beginning, and it showed Harry's kind of paranoia.
Welcome to Royal Exclusive Rewind, where we delve back into the files and relive some of the highlights and lowlights of royal family history. Today I'm joined by royal experts Ingrid Seward and Phil Dampier to discuss the arrival of one of the most significant royal faces this century. October 2016, Prince Harry has a new girlfriend. She was American, she was an actress, she was a divorcee, she was Meghan Markle. But it was a whole year before she made her public debut with Harry on her arm at Toronto Invictus Games. Welcome guys. Ingrid, take us back to October 2016. Meghan was named in the newspapers. I mean, Prince Harry had had quite a few girlfriends before, but this one suddenly seemed more important.
I think when you said she was American, she was a divorcee, I think, and she was an actress, I think that should have gone zing, this is dangerous. We loved Meghan. We thought, everyone did, the Queen loved Meghan and had high hopes for her. I just remember the cover of a certain magazine and it was said, I'm wild about Harry. And she looked gorgeous. She'd never looked better before or since. Absolutely gorgeous. And she was so open and talked about Harry and how she and Harry loved each other. And that really stuck in my mind. I thought, this girl is really different. And then a friend of mine spotted her walking down Kensington High Street. And the reason that he looked at her was because she was wearing Wellington boots, which is most unusual in Kensington High Street. And she went into Whole Foods and he followed her. And then he said to her, oh, I loved you in Suits. And she was thrilled and chatted away to him. And he thought, is this the girl that's going out with Harry? So he then followed her out. And indeed, she went back to Kensington Palace. And that was the sort of day that the story broke.
It was huge news because Harry had lots of, lots of girlfriends in the past. Meghan seemed immediately more important, as I say, because within a couple of weeks there'd been obviously lots of stories about Meghan and who she was in her past. We're talking about a divorcee, American, and an actress. And then he put a statement out saying that the coverage had crossed a line. He said that she'd been subjected to a wave of abuse and harassment and racial undertones. For me, Phil, I don't know if take us back to that moment, because that's no one had really done that for, what was the effect there? They'd only been going out for a couple of months. No one had actually put a statement out like that. That's when I realised, hey, she might be hanging around, or Harry wants her to hang around.
I thought we were completely and utterly shocked by that, weren't we? I just couldn't believe it when he did that, because, I mean, looking back, I think there were one or two remarks in a couple of columns that made some rather unpleasant remarks about her background. But generally speaking, 99% of the coverage was overwhelmingly positive and welcoming her and wanting her to succeed and wanting her to, the relationship to flourish. And as you say, he'd had previous girlfriends. I mean, Chelsea Davy, I think, was, one of the great loves of his life, but she didn't really want to live in the goldfish bowl, did she? She didn't want to do the job. And so you're talking about, trying to find someone who's a potential princess, a potential working royal. But she just seemed like a breath of fresh air, Meghan. I just couldn't believe it when he started already sort of complaining to the press that she was being mistreated, because generally speaking, I don't think she was.
It was a really bad beginning.
I thought it was a very bad beginning, and it showed Harry's kind of paranoia, to the fore. I mean, my book, if I might produce my book as Exhibit A, Matt, this is obviously written later, but. I said, she came from a mixed race background. We saw she was active in social issues, but she's going to be a breath of fresh. Together they will breathe fresh life into the ancient institution of monarchy, just as it needs it most. It was all sort of positive and welcoming her. And it's only later that it turns out.
Well, if you remember, in later days, which we might get onto in later episodes, but in later days on Harry and Meghan's Netflix show, their head of Archwell, James Holt, who worked with the couple for many years, he said, if you were writing the royal family story as a novel, it is almost at this point in history you would want to be writing in a new character like Meghan. It needed a boost of energy and modernisation that would speak to a new generation of people. Did we need Meghan in 2016? Did the royal family need this injection of energy to speak to a new generation of people?
I think the royal family did need an injection of energy. And the Queen saw that more than anyone. And when she first met Meghan, I think Meghan and Harry went to have tea with her. She liked her. It was only later that she had the big doubts. But initially, she liked her, and she thought, this is going to be good. And she thought of the Commonwealth, and she thought how great they could be for the Commonwealth. And it was all very positive. And I think we all felt positive about it.
I mean, prior to William and Kate getting married in 2011, the royals were just sort of flatlining a bit, weren't they?
Yes.
And it really took off with them. And then, so 5 years later, to get another glamorous couple as well, it was perfect, wasn't it? It was going to be great. Two teams. The Queen wanted them to go out and in the Commonwealth, you know. But we're jumping the gun a bit here. We're going.
No, yeah, we were getting on to later years,
Yeah,
but there was an immediate frenzy about, you know, immediate interest, because everyone, you know, it was Diana's son. You know, he was single. People liked Harry, so there was immediate interest into.
He was very popular, wasn't he?
Into his girlfriend.
Absolutely,
and over
everyone
that
loved
time,
Harry.
we didn't really see Meghan and Harry together. There was a few kind of paparazzi shots or pictures taken of them. I think they went to a wedding in Jamaica for a friend. I think they had a couple of holidays together. And then Meghan shut down the TIG, and then she did this interview that you were talking about, I think, in Vanity Fair,
Vanity
with the
Fair,
front
yes.
page, we're a couple, we're in love. But the first time we actually saw them as a couple, their kind of unveiling, was at the Toronto Invictus Games, Phil. And you were there in Toronto, weren't you, when we first saw them together? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, but we'd had the telltale signs, as you say, online that there might be a serious relationship. And I had a tip that something might happen at the Invictus Games. So I went out to Toronto. I was actually covering it for a couple of Sunday newspapers. And what happened was that on the Saturday night, there was the opening ceremony of the Invictus Games, and Harry was making a speech. But he was in a kind of VIP area with Melania Trump and with Justin Trudeau. And there was no sign of Meghan. And I kept asking Jason Knauf, their press officer, whether she was going to turn up or not. And he wouldn't answer my questions. He was playing cat and mouse. He was playing silly whatsits. You know, he just wouldn't help me and cooperate. Which, bearing in mind, with the time difference, I was right up against a deadline to get this in the paper. I was getting very, very frustrated. And it was in this enormous, great place, the Air Canada Centre, it's an ice hockey stadium, indoor stadium with 20,000 seats, and we were right up in the gods. And fortunately, a very eagle-eyed photographer spotted her arriving in the crowd, and she was several yards away from Harry and sitting separately with her friend Marcus Anderson. And that was it. The moment I saw her turn up for that, I knew they were going to get married. I just thought, this is it. This is the moment. And then 2 days later, we were watching the wheelchair tennis event out in the sunshine outside in Toronto. And press officer came over and said, right, they're going to come out in a minute. Whatever you do, don't leap up and start going bonkers, otherwise they'll leave. So even then, they were trying to sort of control things. And then they arrived hand in hand, both with dark glasses, her with her ripped jeans and this shirt, I think it was shirt made the husband made by a friend of hers, I think. So she was promoting things already. And everyone went nuts, and they were sitting there for about half an hour, and that was it, you know, that hand in hand. And 2 months later, they got engaged.
Well, are we looking at this?
So this was really, you know, this was the coming out. And the moment you saw them together and saw them like that, you knew that. I personally just thought, right, they're definitely going to get married.
Are we looking at this in rose-tinted glasses all these years later, thinking that people were overwhelmingly supportive? Because if you listen to Harry and Meghan's story, that they seem to think that they were, you know, mistreated in the first year by the public.
They were already moaning, weren't they? That's the thing, they were already moaning. So this was a sort of foretell of what was going to happen.
I mean, we know from Spare and everything that's happened subsequently that obviously he'd bottled up a lot of angst, a lot of business, a lot of, you know, things that happened to his mother and his parents' divorce and then her death. Obviously, this had played on his mind, but William had to go through the same, and he's managed to cope with it, you know, and the feelings he has of being the spare. Obviously, this is something which has really affected him. But you know, I just wish he hadn't blamed everyone else for it, you know, because it wasn't the press, it wasn't the public. They all wanted it to succeed, you know. And I have to say, looking back on it, you talk about rose-tinted spectacles. I mean, I just personally don't think that Meghan ever had the slightest intention of staying in the royal family. I think she just saw it as a career move, and she just, you know, latched onto him and made her one of the most famous people in the world overnight, and has tried to monetize it. I'm afraid that's my personal opinion now, looking back on it.
Ingrid, taking the first year as a whole that we've carefully summed up, in all the years that you've been covering the royals, can you think of anybody who entered this royal sphere, a member of the royal family, that has had such a long-lasting impact on the royals?
Yes, of course, Diana. Absolutely. her influence is still felt today. And I think that Meghan was just gorgeous and very good-looking, gorgeous-looking girl, and we were happy for Harry, and we were happy for Charles when Diana appeared.
But the extraordinary thing was that when she came on the scene, she was 36, the same age as Diana was when she died. That's the incredible thing, isn't it? We think of her as a young, glamorous woman, but she was a 36-year-old divorcee who, for want of a better phrase, had been around the block a few times.
Yeah.
She knew a lot about life, and I think she knew what she was doing, and I think that's what we underestimated.
And I suppose going way back, Princess Margaret had also had the same effect. So it's not, the Meghan-Harry thing is just exaggerated because of the way that the press and everything works nowadays. I mean, imagine Diana in the days of the internet. There was no internet. It was tough enough anyway for her, but they had to put up with the internet, everything.
Social media.
And the social media and the trolling, you see, which is completely new thing. Well, it certainly
It's only
is.
happened in the last 10 years, hasn't it, really?
Yes.
So as Phil points out there, he was in Toronto, saw them together, thought, by looking at them, you thought that they were going to get married. Harry did propose. You could just tell, yeah. Harry did propose shortly afterwards. We believe shortly afterwards. There's two different stories of when he did or didn't actually propose. It was announced in November, and then they got married the following year, and everyone lived happily ever after, right?
If only.
Right.
If only, Matt.
Well, there's plenty more to talk about Meghan and Harry in the last couple of years, definitely. But that was a good roundup of their first year. So thanks very much, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's all we have time for on Royal Exclusive Rewind. But join me next time for some royal nostalgia when we open the files and relive another iconic moment.